Is Laura Kelley. I am the chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party and an immigration attorney, and I'm here with Mike Davey, former mayor of Key Biscayne, former congressional candidate for District 27, and former Republican. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Laura.
I really appreciate it. So, you've been the mayor of Key Biscayne, and you've been deeply involved in local politics. How did your experience shape your perspective on the Democratic Party and the way politics function at different levels?
So I think local politics are obviously the most important. I mean, well, to me, they're obviously the most important form of government, right? Your municipality handles your day-to-day needs and issues. And I think what I've seen as a council member, as a mayor in 20 years of service to the community, what I've seen is that we need to be we need to be talking to our constituents always. You always have to be engaging with them, getting their perspective, but it's sometimes very hard. And what we always need to be improving our means of communication, because that's the biggest challenge we face.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here because you know, as you said, speaking to your constituents, it's very important. What we're seeing right now is a lot of town halls happening throughout the nation,
Sure.
and people are expressing their discontent with, for example, the recent budget that was initially approved by the Republican Congress, and also the federal cuts that have been happening as a result of DOGE. What do you think about the fact that our congressional representatives here in Miami-Dade County, particularly the Republican ones, Maria Elvira Salazar, Carlos Jimenez, and Mario Diaz-Balart, haven't done any town halls here?
Yeah, I think it's disappointing. I think you have to. If you are in elected office, you have to be responsive to the people. There's no other way to be. I can tell you, when you're in a local municipality, our village has about 15,000 residents, and you go to the supermarket, you're going to have a town hall. People are upset about trees, they're going to come up to you. They're upset about the sidewalks, they're going to come up to you. And that's their right. And we as electeds have an obligation to be doing everything we can to communicate with them. And I have been very troubled by the fact that, you know, my Congresswoman Salazar has not been responsive. You know, she sent, when the TPS thing came out in January, where this administration has decided to cancel TPS for Cubans, Venezuelans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, she sent a strong letter. But the fact is, she had the capability, as one of three South Florida congresspeople, they could have stood together and refused to vote for the budget until TPS was reinstated. They didn't do that. They didn't take any action in furtherance of the interests of their constituents, and that's just wrong for an elected official.
Absolutely. And they did introduce the Venezuelan Adjustment Act. She was one of the co-sponsors, the only Republican co-sponsor. But again, it's meaningless without any
Correct.
leverage.
Correct.
And they have leverage.
Absolutely. They had leverage with the budget. They should have utilized that to get some things done for their constituents.
Absolutely. So sorry for that slight diversion, but I think you're absolutely correct. It's the constituents, it's about the people, and whether it's local or it's congressional, it is still local because you're representing people right here
100%.
in Miami-Dade County. So thank you for that. And you know, you're now also a state committee man for the Florida Democratic Party, representing us here in Miami-Dade County, at least us Democrats here in Miami-Dade County. And we have a very diverse community. How do you approach bridging divides within the party and between parties in a community like Miami-Dade County?
It goes back to communication. I think we in the Democratic Party have to stop talking over one another. We have to start listening, and then that expands out to the community at large, right? We as Democrats have more in common with Republicans and independents than we have that break us apart. And the fact is, we all want our families to be healthy, to be safe. We want to be able to earn a decent living. We want to be able to feel some sort of security in our lives. And so we as Democrats, we need to reach out across to other members of our party that we may not agree with on issues, and then also to Republicans and independents who we don't agree with on issues, to have the conversation, sit down for the beer and say, look, this is my position. You have a different position. Let's figure out, how do we get to a common ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. And I think what's unfortunate is sometimes people are unaware that we have similar positions or that we're a lot closer. We have more in common than we even know because there's such a divide in misinformation and disinformation. And that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations.
Absolutely. I think the biggest challenge we have is, you don't get your own facts. Facts are facts, and they're tenacious things, and everybody has to operate from the same set of facts. So you take the issue on Ukraine, there are facts about Ukraine, and you have to go by those facts. And
unfortunately, we have a president who's unwilling to state the facts as reality. For example, I mean, you mentioned Ukraine and facts, and he specifically said that Russia did not invade Ukraine.
Right.
And that's just false. And so how do we combat that misinformation?
You just have to keep going back at it with facts. You have to talk to people, and you have to listen to them, but then you have to refute them. When they're saying things that aren't factually correct, point out that it's not factually. Give them look, we're lawyers, right? We give a citation to a fact. Here's a fact. I'm not making this up. This is where it comes from. This is as neutral. I try and find as neutral a source as I can to give people the facts. And hopefully you can get them seeing why we have such strong positions. I mean, Ukraine, in 1994, I think it was the Bucharest Accords, the United States agreed, they guaranteed the safety of the security of the Ukraine in exchange for Ukraine's nuclear weapons. 1994. That's 30 years ago. We have an obligation to live up to the terms of that treaty. They gave away their nuclear weapons. We have an obligation to assist them with their security.
Absolutely. And it was Marco Rubio that pointed that out not so long ago.
Correct.
To see him now in his position where he's at, basically supporting this administration that seems to want to strong arm President Zelensky. It's very troubling, again, that we would
disappointing.
To go back on our word. Because the world does look to the United States as the greatest global power, and now it seems that we're aligned with Russia instead of being allied with NATO and our European partners, our other European partners like Ukraine.
Well, that's exactly right. And look, people, Europe has to do more. I agree. Europe should do more, and they are. And this is partially a wake-up call for them, but that does not alleviate our obligations to Ukraine and to NATO and to the global economy. It's stability in the economy that's going to help us grow and prosper.
And I think that when you can have these conversations with people, you can actually get that common ground. The problem is that I find that, we're reliant on social media and slogans or just like memes rather than actual conversations.
Yep.
And do you think that hinders our ability to connect with others at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think because social media seemed, and again, I'm no social media expert, but what it appears to be is your interests sort of drive what you are shown. You keep seeing stuff that agrees with you. And so we all sort of fall into that trap of, this all agrees with me, so I must be right. And what we have to do is challenge ourselves. And when somebody comes with a fact that doesn't match what we believe to be true, we have to look at that. And we have to adjust. Are our beliefs wrong, or is that incorrect information?
Right. Cognitive dissonance and being willing to be wrong.
You have to be willing to amend your positions. Look, I was a Republican. I'm a Democrat now.
And we're so thankful for that, Mike. So there's this growing perception within the Democratic Party and I think in mainstream media that the Democratic Party is toxic. And I want to know whether you think that's a fair assessment, and where do you think this narrative comes from?
No, I think it's talking points. I think it's MAGA talking points, frankly. That's where it is. I think we have our challenges. We did not perform the way we should have in 2024, particularly for those of us in South Florida. I think it was disappointing that we lost all 5 constitutional position races. We didn't have very good showings in 27, 28, 26. And I think we could have done better. But that's on us. And I think to call us toxic, I don't think we're toxic. The Democratic Party is trying to be as inclusive as possible. I mean, I am a member of the Democratic Party, and there are members that are far, far left of me. But we're all in the same party. We're trying to make our way. So to say it's toxic, I disagree. I think we do have to stop talking at people, and we have to do more listening. I think one of the reasons I believe we had so many issues in 24 was because while the economy was improving for many people, a large percentage of our population didn't feel like it was. And we kept talking at them instead of listening to what they were saying about their not feeling that the economy was in their favor. They're right. Look, working class Americans in the past 45 years, $50 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the working class Americans to the billionaire class. And unfortunately, it was Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economics. They did not work. They've only worked for corporations and the ultra wealthy at the expense of small business owners and working class Americans who are getting a W-2. And we have to do a better job of listening and then giving a plan of how we're going to address those issues. With working class Americans, we need a fair tax policy. Fair tax policy. Tesla paid almost zero in income tax last year. That's absurd. Their taxable rate overall was about 0.4 when most corporations were at 20%. That's not acceptable. The richest among us, in fairness, they should appreciate this government more, and they should be contributing their fair share.
Absolutely, because it is the working class, right, that buys their products.
Yes.
If they are providing goods and the services,
Yep.
really, frankly, in everything, it's us that pay for these services, and we're also the people who work in these companies.
Right.
And the economy hasn't been working for the working class for a very long time, and it's unfortunate because I think this is getting worse right now. And I would love to hear your perspective, but we see the cuts to federal workers, their job cuts. We see cuts to Medicaid now being approved almost unanimously, and all three
by the Republicans.
By the Republicans, exactly. All three of our congressional representatives here in Miami-Dade County voted for this budget that cut Medicaid
Yep.
and SNAP benefits. And these are things that help working class families get by. What is your perspective on that?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, we need to do more for working class Americans. And this DOGE thing, I've been in government, like I said, over 12 years of elected service, 20 years in total working. We always want to be more efficient with our tax dollars. We always want to stretch them as far as we can. This DOGE approach is so irresponsible in that they're going in and slashing departments without actually evaluating what departments should be slashed and where should they surgically be slashed. What they're doing is cutting. Now they're going to hire all these people back. I mean, you look at the nuclear weapons people, you look at the FAA, you look at USAID was just told one of their programs was shut down. The guy who was making this peanut butter type substance to send overseas to starving children he shut it down. Now he's being told, oh, our bad, restart. Well, that costs money.
Exactly.
It's costing us more money. And the savings they've brought that they've shown, it's baloney. It's not factual. So I am all for government efficiency. We need to do a better job in government of doing that. But this was not the way to have somebody appointed, by the way, a government contractor who makes about $2.6 billion in government contracts every year.
And who is also the wealthiest man in the world?
Well, but I don't mind if it was the wealthiest man, but he's a contractor. If I was the mayor and I brought in my buddy who had contracts with the village to cut the village budget, I wouldn't even get ridden out of town on a rail. They'd just shoot me on sight. I mean, it's an absurd conflict of interest for this chucklehead to be doing these things.
Right.
And it's irresponsible. It's bad government. Donald Trump has done a hell of a job of running a casino into the ground. He's run an airline into the ground. He's been found guilty for fraud. Trump University with the cancer charity that he and his son ran, that they were found to have used improperly. I mean, this guy has a history of just making bad decisions. And we have to get out of this. We have to stop. And the legislature, our three representatives, should be standing up. They represent the people of South Florida. They don't represent Donald Trump.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's the power of the people, right? To be talking to our representatives, forcing them to come here and own that they're essentially allowing this to happen.
Yes.
I mean, we're both, as you mentioned before, we're both attorneys. I was reading something in a court case, and I believe in the USAID case, and essentially the attorneys, the Department of Justice attorneys on this case cannot adequately handle the case because they're understaffed. And they don't have the resources. And the attorneys working on this case are working 7 days a week. Yep. Who knows how many hours a day, trying to pursue or defend this case, that they
Right.
cannot because they just don't have the staffing, which is an irony. I mean, and you've talked about Donald Trump running these businesses into the ground. How many times has he gone bankrupt?
Right.
What does that mean for our nation right now when we see it's it's the basically our institutions
Right.
are
Well,
being
I
dismantled
mean,
right before our eyes?
look, we'll talk about it. I'm a former Republican. I left because of Donald Trump. I want to be clear. I left because the party became the cult of personality to Donald Trump.
Mhm.
All right. They stopped having policy and they just had an adulation for this man that is not, and he is, it's about him. It's about the grift. It's always been about Donald Trump. How does Donald Trump get richer? I mean, you see all this stuff. He's selling stuff on TV. He's selling on the internet.
Crypto.
Crypto now. He wants to make a national crypto fund. Where there's conflicts of interest, even the perception of a conflict of interest is wrong for an elected official. But when you actually have a legitimate conflict of interest, like you own a bunch of crypto and you want to make a national crypto reserve, it's absurd. It's just wrong. There needs to be strong policy. You need to go through the legislature. The legislature has to approve these things, put regulations in place for it, and then you move forward.
Absolutely. It's all the due process.
Correct.
Due process.
We are a country of laws, and unfortunately, they are attempting to undo that at this time.
It's deep beyond troubling.
Yeah.
And in line with that, the Republican Party in 2020, after their losses, they did not have their tail between their legs. They did not go back to the drawing board and say, what should we do differently? How should we message differently? They doubled down.
Yep.
And so it's interesting. I don't believe that the Republican Party was seen as toxic, obviously, that they were, elected with a much wider margin than we expected or hoped for in 2024. But why do you think it is that the Republicans don't have that same, buy into this idea of toxicity, or that their message isn't working, and where Democrats, for example, right now, we are kind of going back to the drawing board and trying to determine how we move forward for 2026?
Well, because Democrats tend to think things through. That's just, and the Republicans are just sort of knee jerk. Oh, let's have an insurrection. What the hell? How can it hurt? And I think we try to think things through before we do it. And sometimes we overthink things. And sometimes, when the bully comes at you, you got to punch him in the mouth.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think there's this perception also, like you mentioned, you're a former Republican, and it wasn't so long ago that you were a Republican.
8 years.
And you changed your party affiliation. Do you feel comfortable in the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. No, I feel like the Democratic Party believes in upholding the rule of law. We can talk about all sorts of issues, and we can have minor disagreements about how policy should be implemented, but we all believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for every individual American in this country. It's not really, we're not as far apart as they, meaning the MAGA class. I won't even say Republican anymore. The MAGA class, they want the divide. They want the other. That's why they go after, they go after the immigrant. They go after the trans. They go after the DEI, because it makes somebody else the other. That person's to blame for your problems. Not us cutting the billionaires' taxes. It's those people. And that's what they do. And that's what we've got to punch back on.
Absolutely. And this is, I think, what some people don't understand is that the Democratic Party is a center left party.
Yes.
And frankly, when you compare it to other parties throughout the world, in Europe, for example, or
Right.
Latin America, we would be considered the party of the right, not the
Yes.
party of the left. And unfortunately, the messaging is that we are this left-wing, extremely progressive, party. I mean, there was these crazy messages that went out during the 2024 election cycle that your child could, go to school one day and have a sex
Right.
change operation.
Right.
I mean, absurd things. And it seems like the Republicans have been very good at taking the most extreme, absurd things that anyone has ever said ever.
Right.
And then saying, this is what the Democratic Party believes in. But it's not true. We have a platform. We have values. And they're exactly what you said, the rule of law, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We want safety. We want security. We want prosperity. But we want fairness. We want justice.
That's it. All these groups that they are trying to single out as to blame, they're individuals who deserve their rights. And Republicans have kind of gotten away from that. It's sad. It's sad to see, frankly, the party of Lincoln, party of Teddy Roosevelt, the party of Eisenhower going down this authoritarian path of singling people out. Voter suppression is happening. I mean, the SAVE Act is going to make it so that any woman who's been married, and has changed her name, and changed her name, will now have to carry her birth certificate with her to go vote. I mean, they're making things more challenging for people. Why? Why are we doing that?
I mean, it seems to me that if your ideas are good, if your policy is good, we should want more people to vote, not
Correct.
less.
That's
People who
absolutely
are eligible to vote, of course.
Yes.
But this idea that there's widespread voter fraud is such baloney, as you said earlier. It's not true. But again, it's to justify the suppression of voters who
Absolutely,
are U.S. citizens who are eligible to vote so that their voices aren't heard.
Correct.
And I guess my question would be then why don't they want their voices heard?
Well, I think that's a rhetorical question.
is.
We all know. We all know that because their ideas aren't good. I mean, Project 2025 is a debacle for this country.
Absolutely.
Tariffs are bad. Getting rid of education is bad. All these things are intended, again, to keep people. What did Trump say? I like the uneducated. Why? Because they will vote for these things. They will listen to what he's saying and believe him, unfortunately, because he's on TV saying these things. And we've got to be better. We've got to reach out to these people and say, no, here are the facts. Fact is, you're a working class American. You absolutely are right that this economy is not working for you. And that's because of tax policy for the past 45 years has taken the wealth from working class Americans to the billionaire class. And Don the distractor is the puppet of the billionaires. Just look who the de facto president of the United States is right now.
And that's absolutely right. And I think it's really important to say that by talking about what the working class deserves, what the working class, like fairness for the working class, that we have a fair tax rate and we get paid fairly so that we can buy homes,
Right.
enjoy a prosperous life. That is not socialist. That is not communist. That's just basic common decency and what's right for our communities. I think, like you said, everybody wants the American dream.
Right.
And it keeps being pulled away from us.
Well, and that's and to your point, like all these people that we're talking about, most of them spend 90% of their income they don't put money away, right? They're not buying yachts. They're not putting money away. They're surviving on the income that they've got coming in. And I think when your cost of living, in the 80s, the cost of living and median incomes were pretty close. But then we've seen since the tax policy, they've gone like this. So now the cost of living is like this, and people aren't making it. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. And we've got to get back to a time in the 50s and 60s, our tax policy, we were the greatest economic power in this world. And our tax policy was tougher for people who are making, over $1 million a year. The tax policy was, I think it was 70%. I'm not advocating for that, but I want people to pay their fair share. I want corporations paying what they should be paying, not just W-2, not just small business owners. Everybody needs to pay into the system to make this happen. And all these cuts they want to do to Medicaid, that's going to devastate families, particularly here in South Florida. Think about all the families that need Medicaid to help with the care of their older parents or special needs children. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and you cut these things, these will have real ramifications for real people here in our community, and we should be standing together. Republicans, Democrats, and Independents should be standing together to defend these people. That's why we have society, is to defend the most vulnerable, and we're not doing it right now.
Well, and something that you just pointed out, there's so many people who are living paycheck to paycheck, not able to save money for a savings account, let alone retirement.
Correct.
And they rely on Social Security for when they become of age so that they don't have to work until they die.
Correct.
And we're also seeing that Social Security cuts are on the table. I just heard our consultant, Elon Musk, talk about Social Security being a Ponzi scheme. Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme.
No.
We pay into it, and it is specifically for people who do not have the ability to save and to invest. The idea that, if you put this money into the stock market, you would have so many more returns than if you put it into Social Security. We're not talking about people who have 401ks
Correct.
or IRAs. We're talking about people who are living paycheck to paycheck and that have worked their entire lives and deserve
and paid into the system.
And paid into the system, exactly. And they deserve to have some peace and rest in their older years.
And mind you, it's also financially prudent. because by having those people have a level of support, it helps the rest of us, it helps their families, right? Their children don't have to take on all of the burden of their parents as well as their own children and themselves. I mean, this is what society does. We look out for the most vulnerable. Yeah, Social Security payments probably not going to be meaningful to me as it is to somebody who's been working an hourly rate job their whole lives and is finally and gets to a point. By the way, these aren't people who necessarily don't want to work anymore. It's
Right.
just people who may not be able to work anymore. If you're a construction laborer who's been working his butt off or her butt off since she was 18 and gets to be 65 years old, that's a long time to be working in the hot sun doing work. You probably banged yourself up a few times. They can't continue to work. And so we're saying, too bad, move on. You know, you're dead to us. That's absurd.
Yep.
We're the United States of America, and we have an obligation to people like that.
Absolutely. And given that our policy is very much in favor of the working class and fairness and justice, yet what we see is that there's a struggle amongst party leaders to create an effective message. And I hear that from I've been doing the rounds around various clubs and caucuses, speaking to our fellow Democrats, and they're really angry that we don't have an effective message. What do you think the issue is there?
I think we need to listen. Again, that goes back to my point. We need to listen to the working class, and we need to acknowledge their suffering. You know, again, during 24, I think a lot of people said, well, it's tough, but it could be worse, right? And that doesn't, if somebody's struggling to make it, if somebody's, you know, their credit card bills are going up, their home's getting close to being foreclosed, or they're about to be evicted, it doesn't make them feel better to say, oh, well, the economy's getting better. And we are not the worst country in the world for inflation. We have to address, you know what, you're right. This is unfair. This system, the way it is set up, is more, it's much tougher for working Americans than it is for the billionaire class. And so we have to address that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's something that when I was also running for office in 2024, that I made that mistake. And I learned from it. I think that we have to hold all of ourselves accountable for the
100%.
mistakes that we made in 2024. And I was like, wait, the economy, we've had the best economic recovery of any other country, and our our inflation rate is down. But you're absolutely right. That is not empathetic to the person that you're talking to that actually feels the pain of not having as much money as they had before.
Correct.
The people who are struggling, and people are struggling. And
100%.
so, you know, again, it's not talking at people, it's listening. And then I think the message comes from there, right? Or that we can, you know, it's the conversations.
Yep.
You know,
100%. We have to talk to people. And then when we get elected, we have to carry through. We can't be worried. I think the biggest challenge, and again, I go back to my own experience, because I noticed after my first term in office that you want to stay in office because you feel like you can do a better job than anybody else out there running. The fact is, you've got to be true to your values. If you promise to work on something, you've got to work on that. You've got to make that a goal. And we need to do a better job as Democrats. Don't worry about the reelection. Worry about doing the job you have. We're always, people in elected office a lot of times tend to look to, I got to save my job. No, you don't have to save your job. You have to do your job. And that should save your job for you. If you're working for the people and they're happy with what you're doing, they'll vote for you again.
absolutely. What do you think the biggest challenge facing Democrats going forward to 2026 is going to be?
I think the challenge is we need to start now. We need people to, another problem with all, and I think it's, well, both parties, politicians in general, is we don't show up until it's election season. And people want to talk. They want you to listen to them now when you're not asking. We need to be asking of them less and giving more to them, giving our time and being in front of them and having them voice their frustrations. Let them know. I mean, these town halls that people have had, they're getting booed, but you know what? That's the job. If you're going to get booed, you're going to get booed. Suck it up, Buttercup, and get back in the fight.
And listen to what they're telling you.
And absolutely.
And represent your constituents.
Correct.
Effectively.
Absolutely.
Well, we're almost at time, so I wanted to ask you, how can listeners get involved in local politics if they really want to make an impact?
Look, I started out because cars were speeding down my street. That's how I was walking my dogs. I had no sidewalk in the cars, so I went into this village hall and got into a little bit of a brouhaha because they wouldn't put sidewalks, then they wouldn't put speed bumps until I got everybody to sign off. And then when I got everybody to sign off, they said, "Well, we don't have the budget for it." I said, "Okay, now you're moving the goalposts." So I got involved in politics. But if you have an issue you're passionate about, if it's sidewalks, if it's schools, if it's trees, go to the meetings. Start by watching the meetings. Start by paying attention to what's going on in your community. Understand who the players are. You have a mayor? What do you have? A commission? Do you have a council? There's differences. What is the setup? Who represents you? Are all the electeds at large, or are they by district? Figure out who those people are and meet with them. They want the input. Sorry.
No, you're great. Mike, how can people get a hold of you if they want more information about you or how they can get involved in locally?
So I appreciate that question. My information is generally all over the place. Sorry, I'm going to look there. You send me an email, mdavey628@gmail.com. Right now is my personal email. I'm happy to talk to people. Everybody on Key Biscayne had my cell phone number, 917-535-1966. Yeah, I've had people from Doral call me about quinceañeras they wanted to have in Crandon Park, which is not. It's on Key Biscayne, but it's part of the county system. But I can help. I'm not a quinceañera organizer, but look, we as electeds and as candidates have to be accessible to the people who are going to be giving us their vote and giving us their trust. And so I'm happy to do it any day, anytime.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Again, Mike Davey. And thank you all for being here with us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.